How about now? Who's not at the start screen? Up, 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 so I can see you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, let's wait for a moment. Okay, we talked about last time about ProDrug, and we will have an application about ProDrug today as well. But why do we have ProDrugs? Simulate what? Why do we administer a drug that's inactive and wait for the body to activate it and become active? Why don't we just give the active form? I'm sorry? Yeah, say it. It might be easily absorbed. So this is one problem we could solve, right? If the drug cannot be absorbed, for example, okay, so then we could design a prodrug and make it absorbed easily. And then once it gets to the circulation, it passes all the horrible effect of the stomach, the acid, enzymes, the liver, first pass effect. Okay, then once it gets to the circulation, we rely on an enzyme. Most of them rely on an enzyme called the esterase enzyme, which is in the blood, that converts it back to the active form. Okay, so it's like a mask or a way to protect the drug just temporary until we solve some problem. Okay, it could be absorption, could be metabolism, it could be crossing the blood-brain barrier. You know how blood-brain barrier is very lipophilic, so sometimes we make the drug lipophilic until it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and then we rely on the enzymes there or some mechanism there to convert it to the active form. Now, if we can make the drug, if we can solve the problem without losing the activity of the drug, that would be perfect, right? We don't have to give a drug that's inactive and then wait for the body to convert it. But sometimes, in order to fix a problem, the drug becomes inactive. If we can fix that and rely somehow on another mechanism to convert to the active form, then we end up having prodrug approach or prodrug design. Okay. And medicinal chemists love prodrugs because they actually solve a lot of problems for them. Anytime they have a problem with solubility, lipophilicity, anything, right? They just add something to fix the problem, but it's a trick. You have to add something that is also gonna break with some enzymes, mainly the esterase enzymes. Okay, all right, let me check, see who's not at the start screen now. Did you got it? Amazing. I never seen everybody at the start screen. First time. Yeah, we're lucky today. Good. Okay, so let me set the timer. Like I said, you have 12 minutes. It should be 12 questions, 15 questions, multiple choice. Should be straightforward, easy. You're laughing. Okay. Oh, it didn't work? Okay, I'll give you one. So you want to actually sit at the last table? Okay, ready, set, go. Okay, so I assume you guys submitted your answers. You could start working as a team. Notice that I have already scratched the, 1 second, when this comes in. Oh, anyway, so notice that some of these questions are marked as CD instead of AB. So for those that are marked CD, I highlighted them in green and I scratch the other two options for you AB, okay? So you don't get confused, okay? The other ones that are not scratched, then you could choose between A and B, of course, okay? Somebody has a question? Thank you. Does anyone have a stapler by chance, guys? Anybody has a stapler? Has everybody returned their exam paper? Are you ready, guys? Ready? Everybody give me a copy. Okay. Okay, so question number 4. Enteric-coating is used to make the tablet disintegrate in the small intestine, not in the stomach. Okay, I'm sorry, that was a typo. Okay, so I will cancel the question. Everybody gets full mark. Okay, right. So I apologize again. It's miscoded. Instead of that should be false. Okay, that should be false basically. Okay, I wanted to relieve the stress before we start looking at the questions. Okay, question number 1. Drugs administered in infrequent large doses are better tolerated than those administered in frequent small doses. Sorry. Everybody agrees it's false? Which ones are better tolerated, smaller and frequent? But what's the disadvantage of that on the other hand? So we fix the tolerance. When we say tolerance means like, they don't have toxicity, they don't cause toxicity. But what's the disadvantage of having smaller doses and given more frequent? it's not convenient for the patient, right? Remember, we want the drug to be conveniently taken, like, hopefully once a day, and that's it. So you wake up in the morning, you take the tablet, forget that you are sick for the rest of the day, right? Live like a normal person. Okay, number 2. Normally, the amount of time it takes a drug to reach the steady state concentration is less than the amount of time it takes to completely be eliminated. We all know it's false. Why is that? What's the right answer? It's the same. They're equal, right? How much time does it take? 5 to 7. We'll visit this in one of the applications. 3, the peak effect is, yes, ma'am. Right. Okay. Okay. So we'll talk about this in the exercise, because that's why we say 5 to 7. In fact, you will see some textbooks saying 5 half-life, 6 or 7. So it depends on your definition of what is completely eliminated. Okay. So normally, if it's below 1%, we consider the drug is out. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Can you speak up? Oh, sorry. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Any issues with this question so far? All right, next one. The peak effect is an adverse effect that appears when drug's concentration exceeds minimum effective concentration. False. What's right? And well, how would you fix that? It should be it exceeds the minimum toxic. Okay. Number 4, we already talked about that. Number 5. Okay, so actually, before we talk about number 5, let me just at number 4. So hopefully you already know that enteric coating is another name for delayed release. Now, many times, many times, you get confused between a delayed release and all the other kinds of releases: sustained release, controlled release, extended release. Okay, so all these kinds, the extended, controlled, what else? Controlled release, sustained release, extended release. These are all, more or less similar to each other, which means the drugs are released slowly from the tablet, such that you don't have to take the drug more often. Instead of taking one tablet 3-4 times a day, you take it once a day, and the tablet itself releases the drug over the 24 hours. Okay. On the other hand, delayed release means that it uses an enteric coat to protect the drug from the acid. Some drugs are acid labile. They actually are, they can be broken by the stomach acid. So we protect the drug by a coat, enteric coat, such that the drug can pass the stomach to the intestine, and then it's released there, as a whole. The whole drug is released. Okay, so be careful. Delayed release is not like any of the other kinds of releases we're talking about. Delayed means you only delay the release of the drug until you pass the stomach. So you're protecting the drug using the enteric coat. So if you see the term enteric coated, if you see delayed release, they are the same. Okay, and they are different from anything else you will ever see that talks about extended, sustained release. Okay, but I know you have questions, John.
What about capsules that have more than one coating? One is a delayed release, so that you're using the delayed release and then a thicker delayed release to achieve the effect of an extended release.
Yes, you can combine them, of course. What if you have a drug that is that could be affected by the stomach acid, but at the same time you want it to be released in a time control manner? So you could combine. You could have a tablet that's enteric coated, delayed release, and then once it passes to the stomach, to the intestine, it actually releases the drug over a longer period of time. So yes, you could have that approach. Okay. You have, I'm sorry, you have a question there. Question 3, yes, go ahead.
But it says the peak effect matters that when it exceeds the minimum effect concentration. When I read this question, the MEC is the minimum effect concentration, is the minimum concentration. The peak effect is above the MEC.
Yes.
And it says when it exceeds the minimum effect concentration. I mean, it is when it exceeds it.
Right, but
Exceeds the
yeah, I mean, I get your point. I mean, you know, all the effects will happen if you exceed the minimum effective concentration, but peak effect will only occur if you exceed the minimum maximum, I mean, the minimum toxic concentration. Okay. You have a question, Islam? An example of that one uses both. I would say Dipacot extended release. And by the way, most of the time, guys, the most confusion occur in a drug called Dipacot because it's actually designed both in enteric coated form, the delayed release form, and in the extended release form. Okay. Now, because it's been affected by the acid, so the extended release is also a delayed release. Problem is, if you do not pay attention to that, especially in the prescription, when you see like, you know, if they write Dipacot EC, you might think EC is, you know, extended control, whatever. But if you don't pay attention to what's the difference between delayed release and extended release, you could administer the wrong dosage form, which means you could give the wrong dose. Because if you give someone an extended release, assume if it's written for the delayed release and you give the extended release, normally the delayed release or the enteric coat is taken more frequently. If you substitute it for the other one, which is taken once a day, then it's a problem. It's gonna basically you're gonna, you know, like double or triple the dose that is intended. John.
I think isn't that the one where they had the problems where a nurse would not know do not crush, and they would grind the Depakote and put it down a peg tube,
Okay.
and it would all release at once. There's some drugs that they've done that, and some of them didn't.
Okay, so right, so that's why whenever you have an extended release or delayed release format of a tablet, you will always see the warning that do not crush or do not, you know, just swallow as it is. Do not crush or you know, grind or just swallow it as it is. Because if you do, then you break the system, the control system that you have it can, and you can have side effect. Okay. Right. Any questions about this so far? Yes.
Why did some of them have ER and others XR?
Yes, you can have, some drugs can have ER and extended. See, the dose would be different, like with the E, do you say ER?
ER and
Oh, okay. So among the, okay, that's a good one. So among the extended release, there are different ways of drugs, okay? So some of them has a continuous release of the drug, but slowly, okay? Others are more controlled, so they release a small amount, they stop, they release a small amount and stop. So they are not really the same, okay? So among the different extended release forms, the way you could release the drug could have different ways, but I classify them in a one category, you know, the extended release, sustained release, because they basically mean that the drug is released over a long period of time, okay? I classify them different than enteric-coated because it has nothing to do with the time. It's just passing the stomach, you know, being protected from the stomach acid until you pass and then go to the intestine and then you release the drug, okay? But yeah, I mean, if you go to the other forms, then they are different. And you should learn about this when you take pharmaceutics, okay? So you will learn about all these different ways of designing drugs that are extended release, okay? Good questions. Next. Should we move to the next question? Okay, let's see. Oh, number 5. The amount of drug that is bound to the plasma protein gives a better indication of the availability of the drug to its target receptor than the amount of free drug. We all know it's false. Why is that? It's the opposite, right? So it's only the drug that is available free, that's dissolved in the plasma, is the one that gives an indication of how much of the drug is able to reach the receptor. Those drugs that are bound to the protein or even at the tissue, the fatty tissues or anywhere, they actually do not give us an indication of how much of the drug is reaching the receptor. These actually will act as a storage. The drug will be stored there until the time comes, until the free drug is now metabolized. Then the drug will, those stored amount will come out to the plasma and become free, and then you have longer effects. Okay. So yes, eventually, exactly. That's a good point. So those that are stored in fatty tissues or plasma proteins, eventually they will leave that site and become free, which is actually, believe it or not, that's a technique of extending the duration of action for drug. Okay, if I know a drug has a short duration of action and I want it to stay longer in the body, instead of taking the drug more frequently, I want the drug to last for a whole day, then I could rely on these ways, on these techniques. Okay, so if I want the drug to, for example, be stored in some fatty tissues or in the plasma protein, I could design it in a way to bind to these tissues. Most common approach is to make the drug lipophilic, such that it actually binds to these fatty tissues and stay there for a long time, and then it will be released later on. Okay, good. Questions so far? Okay. The most hazardous method of injection for drug is intraperitoneal injection. Okay, well, no, it's false. Which one is the most hazardous? IV. Why is that? Because it's fast, right? I mean, it's within seconds. You could kill someone. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's the most. If you ever work in a hospital, you're gonna give an IV drug. I mean, you won't have time to save that person because, it's just so fast and it's hard to reverse. That's why many times when you give these drugs IV, you have a control of small amount and gradually, and monitor the patient constantly. Okay, within seconds you could harm someone. Okay, so what's intraperitoneal injection then? Inside the stomach, right? Yes, ma'am. Kendra. Okay, that's a good one actually. So intraspinal injection, which is intrathecal. Yeah, intrathecal. That would still be, I mean, serious. But imagine intraspinal is only affecting the CNS, but IV is going everywhere. Okay. In fact, I was thinking to use the intrathecal, but then because of that concern, I was avoiding any, disagreements, any arguments. Melo, do you have a question? Yeah, so the reason we actually use intrathecal, because we are not able to give the drug and make it pass the blood-brain barrier. So if we cannot, like some antibiotics, they cannot pass the blood-brain barrier, and we are not able to do that in any way. So we do it physically. We administer drug into this the cerebrospinal fluid intrathecally. Okay, but I guess the argument is which one is more dangerous. To me, the intrathecal would affect only the CNS, but then the other one, intravenous, would affect everything. But it is dangerous.
If you were to cause some embolism sort of thing by injecting something, injecting it intrathecally would, I mean, it wouldn't be a fun day for the patient but
Mhm.
it's not the same instant. I don't know what happens if you inject potassium into the.
I'm not sure either, but
And I mean,
Mhm.
I've never heard of someone get an intrathecal feeding tube and be killed. I
Mhm.
mean, but I
Yeah.
think when you do that on a patient,
Yeah.
and
Besides, yeah.
catch it too, even catching it quickly, you're really messed up if you're running a
Yeah.
tube feeding.
Yeah, and I do not want to give you the impression that intrathecal is safe. I'm just saying that IV is actually hazardous. You should pay attention, more attention if you ever make a drug to be given IV. Any other questions so far? Okay, let's see. Lipophilic drugs have higher volume of distribution than hydrophilic drugs. True. We all know it's true. Why is that? I just explained that a minute ago, right? I explained how the drug that is lipophilic will actually distribute into the fatty tissues, right? So what does that mean for the volume of distribution? Yes, Kevin. Goes higher, right? It's like, imagine you give a drug and then it's, going deep inside the tissues, then it's, have a larger volume. But if the drug stays only in the blood, it does not spread to other parts, then it has a smaller volume. Think about it in this way, okay? So the apparent volume of the distribution for the drug, even though we're talking about the same person, they have the same total, water, the same amount of fluids, but for one drug, you might have a larger volume distribution, for another, you might have a smaller. Why does this matter? Because eventually, you want to calculate the concentration of the drug in the blood, right? So if you don't know the volume, you're not going to be able to calculate the dose, right? So we go by the plasma concentration. This is how much I want of concentration of the drug in the plasma. So for this drug, the volume is this much. So then I can do the math and calculate the dose. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
I guess on number 7, can you explain it again why lipophilic are better?
You mean have higher volume distribution? Okay, so lipophilic drugs will bind into the fatty tissues deep inside the body, like they will, um, occupy more regions in the body than the hydrophilic. Hydrophilic will stay only in the blood, okay? So those that would go deeper into the body will have a larger volume of distribution. Okay, so the drug will distribute into more areas in the body than the hydrophilic. Okay, make sense? Okay. Okay, drugs with larger therapeutic index are safer than those with smaller therapeutic index. We all know it's true. Why is that? What is the definition of the therapeutic index? It's the ratio between the toxic dose and the effective dose, right? So if the dose of the toxic dose is high, then the ratio is bigger. So there's a space. I guess there is a long distance or space between the smaller and between the effective and toxic dose. So there is a larger window of safety or margin of safety. So higher therapeutic index means drugs are safer. Okay, that's why we say the ones that has small therapeutic index, we classify them as the NTI. What's NTI? Narrow therapeutic index. Okay, and these actually list of drugs that you should know by heart, because when you have an drug interaction, if it's one of these narrow therapeutic index, then you should stop and be more careful. And we should always stop for any interaction, but it's more important when it's a narrow therapeutic index. Okay, number 9. When administering a drug by intramuscular injection, oily or lipophilic suspensions of the drug will have longer duration of action than hydrophilic solutions. We all know it's true, but why is that? We're talking about intramuscular injection. Yes, ma'am. Sure.
Which can be preferred because that makes the dissolution rate much slower and actually increasing the duration of action.
Compared to IV, maybe? Compared to IV, maybe, or compared to lipophilic?
Compared to like
Okay. Okay, so she says that in the note it says the hydrophilic like takes longer time to dissolve into the body. Now, what's the nature of the muscle? It's more hydrophilic than lipophilic, right? The proteins there, the blood and the solvents or the constituents there are more hydrophilic. So if you administer a drug that's hydrophilic, will it dissolve faster or slower than if you give a drug that's lipophilic? Hydrophilic would be faster, right? Have you heard of the intramuscular injection depot? What's the nature of these injections? How often are these taken? Once a month, right? Or sometimes once in 3 months, right? And guess what's the nature of these injections, intramuscular injections? Do you think they would be hydrophilic or lipophilic? Exactly. They're lipophilic or designed using prodrug that we talked about to be lipophilic, such that when you administer a drug, it makes a clot inside the muscle, okay, that does not dissolve easily, and it takes like 3 months for this clot lipophilic to dissolve slowly. So basically, it releases the drug over a long period of time, okay? So the reason I brought this question, because we will see many examples where the drug will be designed to be lipophilic and given intramuscular such that it stays there for like long amount of time. You don't have to worry about it, taking it more often. So to conclude, the intramuscular injections, if they are hydrophilic, they immediately dissolve. But when we make them lipophilic, they form a clot inside the muscle that does not dissolve, and it takes longer time to dissolve. So the drug is released over a longer period of time, and that's why we use them to reduce the amount of time we give the injection. Make sense? Make sense? Yes, Vivian. Versus having it go to the blood? Is that like the reason why we do intramuscular? That's a good point. So yes. I think it I know that that's one of the things of getting the medication into the system, right? But are we not looking at it going through the cell membrane to go into the blood to be distributed? Okay. If it's like the lipophilic, right? It could easily move who has the cell membrane to go into the blood as well. Yes. But if say we're gonna look at it precipitating and make it there since it's hydrophobic. So the goal then is to keep it local, not to distribute it. That's the reason why. Okay, that's a very good question. So her question is, when you give intramuscular injection, is the goal to keep the drug localized and work only locally? The answer is, it depends what you really want to do, okay? So normally, you give the intramuscular injection and the drug goes all over the body, right? Whether it's hydrophilic, accept it fast, or lipophilic, and it's released over a month or 3 months, but it's supposed to go all over the body. Now, what if I want to administer a drug intramuscularly, and I just want it to work on this muscle, like maybe paralyze the muscle for some reason or do a surgery on that? Guess what? In this case, these drugs are administered with another drug that act as a vasoconstrictors. So they constrict the blood vessels around that area such that the drug is not being dissolved or spread to the other parts. Okay, so and I think if you noticed in the reading, there was an example of a drug where vasoconstrictors have been combined with it and given intramuscular to limit the application into that area such that the drug does not distribute. Okay, so it depends what you really want to do. Okay, like if you're working on a surgery and part of the body you just want to, affect this part, not the other parts, then you could use something like that. Okay, so thank you for bringing this. Good point. Right, any other questions? Yes, sir. Okay, that's a good point. So he's asking if, some drugs can have a long duration of action, like 10 years, he said. Yeah. Is it because of the duration of action or of the lipophilicity of the drug? It actually could be either this or that. Okay. It could be that the drug itself has a long duration of action, or it could be, the drug is designed in a way to accumulate somewhere and then released. Okay. It could be the vehicle itself is designed to release the drug over this long period of time, like the 10 years, okay, or 5 years, okay? So it depends on the approach, the design. Good, next. Hydrophilic drugs are absorbed through the skin, meaning transdermal administration, better than lipophilic drugs. We all know it's false. Why? What's the nature of the skin? Lipophilic, fat, right? So then lipophilic drugs would actually be absorbed better than the hydrophilic ones, okay? 11, when a drug is administered sublingually under the tongue, it does not go through the first pass effect. Here is another one about the first pass effect. So sublingual, does it go through the first pass effect? No. Okay. So you're probably talking about the chewable tablets. Okay, so that's a different form. Okay, so the chewable tablets, guys, you actually chew them, and then some of them absorbed under the tongue, act fast. The other ones are swallowed and get absorbed from the stomach, go to the first pass effect. But when we talk about sublingual, like nitroglycerin, it's like a small tablet you put under the tongue because you need something to act fast, and you do not want it to go through the liver and get damaged. So it immediately goes and, lower your blood pressure if you have, heart problems. Yes.
Okay. This question's fine with the sublingual.
Thank you.
But I would be very concerned with a question that said there are two statements. Suppositories avoid the first pass effect. That is true. Suppositories do not go through the first pass effect. Scares me because 1/3 of it does go through. So you avoid the first pass effect with the suppository. But 1/3 of the blood flow to the lower intestines and rectum is going directly to the liver. So
and that's why,
okay. True. The other, it's like, I know,
okay,
but what do I do with that? Because in reality.
Okay. All right. So this brings us back to the question we had last lecture. Okay. So guys, and I need to stress this out because it's important. Okay. So suppository or rectally given drugs, they do not go through the first pass effect. Okay. That's why. Okay. That's why when you administer, suppository, you should not try to push it all the way deep inside. If you do, then there is part of the rectum, the top part of that actually goes through the first pass effect. Okay. If you do, then it's your fault. Okay. Because rectally, rectal suppositories are not supposed to go through first pass effect. That's why when you administer, a suppository to a child or something, you should not try to push it all the way up. Just let it go by itself, as long as it's
So
exactly.
if we're
Okay.
asked this question, we basically say no.
Right. If you're asked this question, then for you, I'll give you 0. For this class, I'll give you full mark.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not about the questions, guys. Okay. Let's, try to learn more instead of, focusing on what's the sentence going to look like. How is it? Think about the application and how this can benefit you. The reason I wanted to, visit this again, because it helps you as a pharmacist to help people. How should suppositories be taken? You could actually let them know that, just let it go slowly. Do not, force it or try to push it all the way, because then you might have to deal with the first pass effect. Suppositories are designed assuming they are given in the right way, so they should not go through the first pass effect. Okay? Good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Oh, 12. Number 12. So delayed release, we would explain that, right? So delayed release formulation, release, the drug in constant concentration over specific. We all know it's false. What would be the how would you fix the sentence to make it true? We'd say extended release. Okay. So delayed release actually would pass the stomach, and that's it. That's the whole goal of delayed release, like enteric coating. Okay, John.
I'm sorry. No, Adderall extended release is actually a formulation of delayed release Adderall and instant Adderall.
Okay. Now we could have a combined of both.
But that's how it is. That's how it.
Okay. So just like with Depakote, you could have a combined of delayed and extended release. But when we talk about,
It doesn't have any extended release. It is actually straight normal Adderall, like the cheap stuff, with beads of delayed release, so that you get a constant dose by the delayed release. Like you're really taking 2 doses.
okay,
But that's they basically figured out to patent Adderall administered that way. They used a delayed release drug to get an extended release effect.
okay, I'll pass on that. Okay, because I know we could argue about, you design the tablet in a delayed release form, but it at the same time takes longer. The thickness of the coating is larger, such that it's, doing both purposes, the delayed release and at the same time the enteric coated. We could go, but I'm worried about the general approach or the general concept of what's a delayed release and what's an extended release. So delay means that you actually pass the stomach. That's the main goal. Okay. So use enteric coat to protect the drug until it passes the stomach and then goes to the intestine.
Okay. Well, I knew Adderall was that way longer than I knew this term, which I'm basically learning right now by knowing I'm getting it wrong.
Okay. 13. Intravenously administered drugs have bioavailability of 100%. We all know that is true. In fact, this is our standard, guys, okay? This is how we decide the bioavailability of a drug. We refer to intravenous. So if you give a drug IV, you measure the area under the curve, and that would be your standard. We will go through some applications. Yes, Melody. Correct. Yes. Anything that reaches the circulation. Yes. Correct. That's a good point. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Okay. We will actually have an application on bioavailability. Can you hold that? Okay. Or show me the page. We can talk about it. Okay. 14. The loading dose help the drug reach the therapeutic concentration more rapidly. We all know that's true. Can you give me an example of a drug that uses the loading dose? And then, so you start by a large dose and then, yes, Kevin. Which one? Heparin, okay. Actually, prednisone is given at higher dose for a reason. It's actually we'll talk about prednisone. It's actually, yeah, vancomycin and Z-Pak. The most common Z-Pak, most of you have seen probably the Z-Pak. It's 5 tablets that you take 2 the first day and then 1. Okay, so that's an example of a loading dose. So the goal is to speed up, make the drug reach the therapeutic effect, and then a drug that is irreversibly or covalently bound to the receptor will have an effect on the amount. Okay, so a drug that irreversibly or covalently bound to the receptor will have an effect, pharmacological effect, for amount of time that exceeds a duration of action of the drug. We all know it's true, but do you agree with me with that? And why is that? Any issues about this question? I see lots of confused faces, except you, John. So can someone explain to me what the sentence says? Melody, yes.
So my interpretation is that if a drug is irreversibly or covalently bonded, that means that it's not. I hope I'm right if I'm saying it on the mic.
It's okay.
Okay. My interpretation is that a drug that is irreversibly or covalently bonded means it's not leaving that receptor. So whatever effect it has, it's going to either, whether that effect is to block the drug or whatever it is, the duration of action will be longer than for a other drug.
Okay, that's very close. But what's the difference between, so there are 2 different time, I guess we're referring to 2 different time definitions. One is the effect, pharmacological effect. The other one is the duration of action. Yes, ma'am.
So on one graph, they have the duration of action as the total time that the MEC is being met by the drug overall in the body. So if just one drug molecule is bonded to a receptor, it'll still have an effect without the MEC being met.
Excellent. Did you guys get that? Okay, so let me try to repeat. So if you look at the curve where it shows the duration of action, as soon as the drug gets above the minimum therapeutic effect, it starts producing the therapeutic effect, right? And then when it's eliminated, as the concentration is going down, as it goes below the minimum therapeutic effect, then presumably the effect should stop, right? Now, what if the drug is of the type that actually binds with a covalent bond, irreversible covalent bond, all covalent bonds are irreversible. So if it binds to the receptor through covalent bond irreversibly, and let's say we administer the drug, it binds to the receptor, and then now we check the drug concentration in the plasma, and we waited enough time until the drug is eliminated and the concentration is below the therapeutic effect. Do you see my point? So even though the drug concentration in the plasma is below therapeutic effect, but there is some drugs that are bound to the receptor through covalent bonds irreversibly, and they are inhibiting the receptor, still producing the therapeutic effects forever as long as receptors are alive, okay? Even though you don't have drugs in your circulation. Do you see my point? Is that clear? Is it better now? Can someone repeat what I just said with your beautiful accent? Who wants to explain what I just said again? I'd like to hear it from you because you guys always make it simpler and yes. Don't mess it up now. No, I'm just messing with you. No.
So what Dr. Khashan is trying to say, even though your body is absorbing and also at the same time excreting the any type of specific drug, if it's covalently bonded to let's say an enzyme, well, you gotta wait 5 to 7 half-lives for it to leave the body because it's still gonna be having effects because it's covalently bonded.
Okay, so actually, I'm saying even after the 5 or 7 half-lives, the drug is out of your circulation, right? After 5 to 7. But the molecules that are bound to the receptor, what happens to them? Are they going to leave the receptor? No. So the effect is going to stay there until, guess what? You know how our body replaces enzymes, receptors with the newer ones? But it takes time. So for example, one of the enzymes, it's called monoamine oxidase, MAO. This enzyme is replaced every 14 days with a new one, okay? So if you give a drug that irreversibly binds to that enzyme, guess what? You're gonna have to wait 14 days before the effect is removed. Even though you instantly stop the drug and you could check it the next day and it's 0 concentration in the plasma. But those that are bound to the receptor will be stuck there forever, okay? Until the whole receptor is replaced. Make sense? Okay. So now, did this question say it in the way I say it? No? Was the question clear? It was clear? Okay. Oh, I see people wanting to ask questions. Yes, you have a question. Yes.
Procaine penicillin, that medication once it's given intramuscular in the body, this takes like a week in the body. So whenever we give a prescription for a patient, if we see a history, we have to check for how long they took that medication, something like the procaine penicillin.
Okay, that's a good example. So in this case, the drug actually stays in the body longer. So we want to be careful when to switch to a different drug or give another antibiotic. But remember, in the case of the antibiotics, they actually attack the foreign bacteria. Well, there's no, well, yes, there is some actually endogenous bacteria. But anyway, so they attack these bacteria or viruses, and we want them to stay there and kill the bacteria forever. We don't care about these things, okay? But if you are trying to design a drug to bind to the receptor, then you might want to give it a break and have the drug leave the receptor, okay? Okay. Seen other people raising their hand. You still have a question?
Well, I was thinking about aspirin. So
yes.
I know it bans covalently, and I was
yes.
It has the side effect. I mean, saying there are some drugs that do it. There are some of them that don't contribute to have that therapeutic effect.
Yes. Yes. So aspirin is an example. Yes. So actually, aspirin binds covalently with the COX enzymes. That's why it has a longer effect than other drugs, NSAIDs. Okay. We will talk about this effect of aspirin. Why does it have a longer effect? Now, remember, some enzymes are reproduced faster than others, so you might not be able to see the this difference in effect between if the enzyme is replaced like within a day or two, then it's not going to matter whether the drug binds covalently or not. Okay. I'm not sure with the case of the enzyme the aspirin binds to. I'm not sure how long, what's the lifetime for that enzyme. But yeah, that's a good example. You have a question, Melody?
Yeah, I guess, can we go back to number 7? I'm still just a little confused from the reading, like she said. And then just, I mean, your blood goes everywhere in your body. And the capillaries allow
Okay, we will. Okay, let's wait until after the application. If it's not clear, we'll. Okay, but save that question. Okay. Right. Any questions about this so far, guys? No. Okay, so we'll start with the applications. Do you need a break? Okay. Yes. All right. Okay, so let's come back at 10:30. Okay. All right. Uh-huh. Yeah.
One time it was 10 questions.
Okay, so no question. Okay, guys. So last time guys. Okay, so last time we finished exercise 5 and 6, and then we did exercise number 7 already. So go ahead and start with exercise number 8 and 9. I'm talking about last lecture, okay? So exercise number 8, and then we'll do 9, and then we'll start with today's applications, okay? Sounds good? So exercise number 8. Let's set, let's say you have 10 minutes, but if you need more time, we'll give you more time. So at 10:40, we'll start. At 10:40, we'll start discussion for exercise number 8. Guys, make sure you are ready to explain your answers, okay? So, like we always do, we'll have ask for volunteers. If not, gonna randomly pick some teams to explain their answers. Okay, are you guys ready? You need more time? You need more time? Are you ready? No? You need more time. Okay, sure. 2 more minutes. Okay, I assume you're ready now, right? Guys? Hello? Are you ready? Ready? Huh? You ready? Okay, so before we start, actually, let's have some fun, watch this video, okay? Yeah. I know the company manufacturer who makes Tylenol. What's the name of the company? Huh? McNeil? They're gonna hate me for this video. But it's very educational. Let me get the voice up and everything before we.
But ingest just a little bit more than directed, and you've suddenly entered new territory. What if I told you that the most popular over-the-counter pain reliever could kill you? It seems hard to believe, but unfortunately, it's true. Right now, I'm talking about one of the most consumed drugs in America, acetaminophen, which most of us know as the active ingredient in Tylenol. It's a drug that's considered to be safe when taken at recommended doses. But ingest just a little bit more than directed, and you've suddenly entered new territory in which both your liver and life are at risk. This is all according to a new in-depth ProPublica report, which lays out the studies and the facts behind a drug that seems to be growing more dangerous. During the last decade in the U.S., 1,567 people died from accidentally taking too much acetaminophen, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. 1,500 deaths over 10 years may not sound like a lot, but just consider how some of these people died. Take Davy Baumling, a 12-year-old kid who took liquid Tylenol to cure a sore throat back in 1999. After just a week on the medicine, he began to vomit blood. In the emergency room, doctors told him he had suffered severe liver damage, and just a few days after that, he was declared brain dead. Lab work showed he mistakenly took just 4 tablespoons more of the medicine per day than he was supposed to. And then there's Antonio Benedì, who once worked as a special assistant to George H.W. Bush. In 1993, he took Tylenol after coming down with the flu. And while he never exceeded the maximum dosage, he did occasionally drink alcohol. After a few days, Benedì was in a coma, on life support, and in need of a liver transplant. Now, keep in mind, at the time, nothing on the box warned about the risk of drinking alcohol while taking the medicine. These are just 2 stories of people who have fallen victim to this accidental overdose in the past. But there are countless more meeting the same fate. According to an ongoing study funded by the National Institute for Health, acetaminophen overdose sends as many as 78,000 Americans to the emergency room each year. 33,000 result in hospitalizations, and the drug is now considered the nation's leading cause of acute liver failure. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has long been aware of the studies that show these risks. In fact, in 1977, an expert panel convened by the FDA said it was obligatory to put a warning on the drug's label, reading severe liver damage. However, believe it or not, the label didn't get added until 32 years later. In 1977, the FDA also said it would issue safety guidelines for how the drug should be administered. But fast forward 36 years later to 2013, and Americans are still awaiting new FDA regulations on the drug. But the agency is not the only challenge to more regulation. Tylenol's parent company, McNeil, has also been a strong force to reckon with. For more than 3 decades, the company has repeatedly fought against safety warnings and dosage restrictions. And despite getting hit with scores of lawsuits and even being removed from some markets, Tylenol has maintained a powerful brand, with most Americans in the dark about the fact that taking as little as 2 extra pills a day could kill you, perhaps making America's most consumed painkiller a killer in itself. In Washington, Amira David, RT.
What do you guys think? So hopefully you have studied the metabolism of Tylenol. Does this make sense to you now? It does? Okay. So I want to highlight few things before we start discussion. So I guess what is the most important message in this video? Huh? I can't hear you, say again. Okay, don't don't drink your 12-year-old. Other messages? Huh? Take Advil. What is the most important message here, guys? Take ibuprofen. Read instructions. I mean, these are all valid, but I'm looking for something. Yes? No? Take the appropriate dose, but why? Huh? Mindful interactions, you know, in the case of the alcohol, yeah. What's the therapeutic index for the Tylenol? Have you noticed how many times she said that with just 2 extra pills you exceed the toxic effect, right? So in the application, you know, hopefully one of you will do the math and calculate the therapeutic index. Notice that the effective dose and the therapeutic therapeutic dose and the toxic dose are very close to each other. With only extra 2 pills, you could actually exceed from the therapeutic into the toxic dose, right? Don't you think that this is the most important message in this video, right? Like, you know, like in the case of the child who had like 4 teaspoons and caused death. So, say it again. Yeah. So therapeutic index for the Tylenol, it's actually can be classified among the narrow therapeutic index, believe it or not. Yet it's not a prescription drug. It's taken over the counter. Okay. So that's message number 1. Message number 2 we're going to see in today's application is the effect of consuming alcohol on the metabolism of the Tylenol. We're going to see how that can actually makes the Tylenol be more toxic, hopefully. Okay. And then finally, how the labeling on the Tylenol has changed as a result of these. In fact, I remember some time ago, there was, you know, Tylenol was taken out of the market for some time, and then they came back with new warnings on the label. Yes, John.
We basically lost, I don't know if they sell it anywhere, the old version of infant Tylenol. We used to have concentrated Tylenol.
Yes.
And I suspect the 12-year-old took tablespoons.
That's a good point.
By taking
yes.
What should have been a tiny syringe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Indeed, they used to sell concentrated Tylenol, and you know these were supposed to be given in with a syringe in a smaller amount. But then people would confuse that. They would think it's it's like the unconcentrated one. They would give the teaspoon instead, and that was one of the other mistakes that happens. And then they stopped selling the concentrated. Now they only sell the diluted concentration. Okay, so which team is gonna come up here and explain, all these points, 5 points, and explain the mechanism of metabolism and relate this to what we have talked about? Any volunteers? Volunteers? Pick a number. Pick a number between 1 and 18. Adishola, pick a number. Go for it, don't think. Huh? Number 1, you're gonna pick yourself. Okay. Yeah. She's like, seriously? Pick a number. Which one? 18? Team number 18? You can do it. All right. Applause.
All right, we divided them into phase 1 and then phase 2.
Okay. So explain the pathway and then explain how does the traffic.
Okay, what we did was divide it into phase 1 and phase 2. So normally, the phase 2 is the glucuronidation. You know, that is a normal thing that normally happens when you take Tylenol. But when normally it is 95% of the time, every single time. But 5% of the time, the Tylenol can actually result into this napkin at the bottom, which is 5% of the time, and it can limit the amount of the substrate that you have in your system in such a way that when it limits it, it can be able to deplete it, deplete that amount that you have in your substrate in such a way that it can accumulate and be very toxic. So when you take alcohol, it will compete, with it will elevate the amount of napkin that is in the system, and a lot of it will be very, very toxic, to the body, and that is why we indicated it with the positive right there. And under normal circumstances, the napkin will actually get converted, to, which is toxic, will get converted to this product right here, and get eliminated. But the alcohol can actually make the matter very worse, accumulation of the napkin.
Do you want to explain how the alcohol actually makes things worse? How does alcohol makes, production of this toxic metabolites more often?
Because it will induce the CYP2E.
So it will induce this step here.
Yeah.
So instead of 5%, when you have more of the enzyme here, because alcohol has induced the synthesis of this enzyme, then instead of 5%, you're going to have more than 5%, let's say 10%. So the chance of producing, so the chance of getting this NABQI, the toxic, is now higher, okay? But as you see here also, the glutathione detoxify this thing. It takes it away and, excrete it out of the body. So in theory, we should still be able to get rid of that. So what is, what is wrong with the GSH is glutathione conjugation. What's wrong with the glutathione conjugation? That makes it not able to remove this toxic molecule. Huh? Our body produces just a small amount of this GSH, okay, glutathione, and it can easily get depleted, right? So we run out of this, and then this toxic metabolite can now attack proteins, nucleic acid, and cause what? Damage to it. What part of the body? Liver, okay? So how does the antidote then work? How do we fix, if somebody has taken too much Tylenol, how do we make sure we help them not get to this stage? The N-acetylcysteine, what does the N-acetylcysteine do? It's a prodrug. Yeah, what does it do? How does it convert? How does it convert to a drug? Cysteine is part of the glutathione 3 amino acids, remember? So N-acetylcysteine is converted to cysteine. Now, in case you're wondering why do we not give the cysteine, because the N-acetyl is better absorbed. So when it's absorbed, then it goes into converted by some enzymes to the cysteine, and the cysteine is one of the 3 amino acids that makes up what? Glutathione, okay? So now you have more glutathione, you can get rid of that. What about the other 2 amino acids? Why are we only concerned? Why do we not administer the other 2 amino acids? Guess what? Our body has enough of these amino acids. I guess the limiting amount, the amino acid that has a limited amount is the cysteine. That's why by giving more cysteine or N-acetylcysteine, our body is able to use it, build the glutathione, and then you know, help us get rid of that. All right. Thank you so much, guys. You did a great job. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm sure you have questions. What? Questions? So first of all, 95% of the drug is metabolized through what? Phase 2. So it actually goes to phase 2 directly without phase 1, right? So it goes to sulfation, glucuronidation. I think one is 50%, one is 45. Anyway, so 95 goes to this phase and then eliminated. None of these are toxic. They're just excreted out of the body, right? Only 5%, which is a small amount, goes into producing this toxic, dangerous molecule, okay? Now, this is not a big deal as long as we are taking the Tylenol as recommended, you know, the daily dose. Problem is, when more of the Tylenol is taken, then more of this product is synthesized, and our body will get depleted of the glutathione because the liver does not have enough glutathione, okay? So it can easily be depleted. When this step is depleted, saturated, then it's blocked. This is toxic molecule stays in the body and cause all these toxic reactions, okay? Now, how does that help us explain how alcohol makes things worse and how does the antidote work? Let's start with the antidote. For Tylenol, it's the N-acetylcysteine, which is converted into cysteine, which is one of the 3 amino acids for the glutathione. Then by giving the N-acetylcysteine, we have more glutathione. This step here is functional now, right? So you could actually detoxify this molecule. Now, how does alcohol make things worse? People who you know, consume alcohol on a regular basis, alcohol, just like some other drugs that induces enzymes. Remember we said drugs can inhibit enzymes or induce enzymes. Alcohol induces the synthesis of this enzyme. Why? Because it's metabolized by this enzyme. So the more you consume, you know, alcohol on a regular basis, your body thinks, oh, I better produce more of this enzyme because it you know, looks like I don't have enough. So it produces more of that enzyme. And now, instead of 5%, you have more enzymes, then this is going to be like, let's say 10%, which makes you have more of this toxic molecule, which means there are more chance of depleting this glutathione and then make toxicity. You got it, everyone? Okay, if you got this, can you raise your hand? If not, just do this so you can see. Okay, excellent. All right. Now, the next application talks about the prodrug. So the question for you is, did you get the chance to look at the application? You need a few minutes to, okay. So let's say 4 or 5 minutes, so at 11:06, we'll discuss this application, okay? Okay, are you guys ready? Okay, so first of all, what is the purpose of making enalapril as a prodrug? Why did we make it? Actually, I should say enalaprilate, because that's the active form. Why did we make the prodrug form of the enalaprilate? Why? What is wrong with the original drug? It's too polar, right? So it would dissolve, but it's not going to cross the cell membrane, right? So then we added in the R group here, we added an ethyl group. Ethyl, 2 carbons. Remember, anytime you add a carbon or just pure carbon hydrogen, then makes it more lipophilic. So now it's more lipophilic. Okay, but guess what? What happens to the activity? The drug becomes no longer active, right? It loses its pharmacological activity. But it's able to cross the cell wall. I mean, yeah, the cell membrane of the gut. Once it gets to the blood, there's a beautiful enzyme that medchems people love to use called what? Esterase, okay? This is an ester group, right? So the enzyme will break this back to its active form in enalaprilate. Problem solved. Make sense? All right, questions about that? Now in the notes, I also mentioned other examples of prodrugs, and make sure you watch the video that comments on this. Things like the sleeping agents where you administer an inactive drug and then you activate it by light. So there are many examples of prodrugs, okay? Just keep that in mind. Are you sure you have no questions? Okay, so let's start by today's applications. Okay, so in application number 1, you know what, I think this is just a simple one. I'm just going to go through the answers right away for this one, okay? It should be straightforward. Okay, so hopefully we all know this is this absorption, distribution, elimination. These are the 3 phases. Where's the lag time? So the lag time means the time it takes before the drug reaches above the minimum effective concentration, okay? So this period here, it's between 0 and the onset time, okay? Okay. And then we have the peak effect, peak concentration, peak time, which is anything in here, okay? Peak effect time and concentration. Then we have duration of action. Where is the duration of action in here? It's when the drug gets above the minimum effective concentration, okay? And then it goes all the way until the drug is below the minimum effective concentration. So this is, let's say, the pharmacokinetic duration of action, which is as long as a drug in the circulation. But then remember, like I said, for some drugs, if they bind to the receptor forever, then even though the concentration is below the minimum therapeutic effect, we're still going to see the effect at the receptor level, pharmacodynamic level, because it's irreversibly bound, okay? And then we have, of course, the minimum effective effect, the minimum toxic effect. Therapeutic window is simply the difference between these two. Therapeutic index is the ratio between these two. So, window means you subtract this from that, difference between the two. For index means a ratio, you divide one by the other. And then I'm going to skip the TF life because I'll go back to that. Area under the curve means, from the time I administer the drug all the way until it's completely implemented, this is called area under the curve. Why is this important? Because area under the curve would help me calculate the bioavailability of the drug, okay? Now, in this curve, how the drug was administered in this example. This is an example of what? IV? Everybody thinks it's IV? That's oral, right? Because it goes up absorption, and then how would the IV look like? We'll start from the 0. Immediately from point 0, it goes all the way down, okay? So the IV would be covering larger area, and then part of this would be the oral. That's how bioavailability is calculated, which is the area under the curve for this, for example, oral route, divided by the area under the curve for the IV. Okay? Now, can you look up the T half-life using this curve here? Let's focus at one of them. Can someone come here and point out how, what is the T half-life and what is, how can you calculate it? We already know the definition of a T half-life, right? What is T half-life? Huh? The time it takes for a drug to, say it again? 50% of the drug is eliminated. Oh, no, I'm sorry. So the 5 to 7 is how much it takes, 5 to 7 half-lives, how much it takes for the drug to be completely eliminated. So this graph, can you look up the time? It's gonna be somewhere, we're gonna use this scale, right, to measure the half-life. Can you use this graph to measure the half-life for this drug? How? Say it again. Okay. I'm saying, can we use this graph? To calculate the T half-life and just say this is how much it's going to be just by looking at this graph. You can actually, yeah. Okay, can you show this here? Will you be able to calculate the half-life here? Assuming this is, each step is 1 hour, will you be able to calculate it here? Okay, show it. You can do it. Take your time. Okay. This is a plasma level, that's right. Yes. Yes. Okay, so if you pick this one here, which is 5, and then we look for the 2.5, which is half this amount, 2.5, which is here, and then we drop this down, the difference will give you the T half-life. Everybody get that, guys? No? Okay. Okay, so let's do it here. I want to use this curve better. Okay, so notice that I picked this part of the graph. I wanted to avoid any influences of absorption and distribution. So I waited for the drug to actually be absorbed, distributed, and then I only want to look at the elimination part, because half-life is always referring to the elimination half-life. Okay, we don't talk about distribution half-life or anything like that. So I'm going to skip all these parts, roughly assume that anything below here is not good because it has absorption, distribution, and elimination all mixed together. It's hard to calculate. And then I'm going to pick some area here and say, okay, so if this is at this time, T1, the dose is equal, let's say, D. And then half of this dose would be D over 2. And this will occur at time T2. And guess what would be my half-life? this period of time. Make sense? Okay, so in this case, the MEC and the other ones, they are not going to actually affect how you calculate the method. So let's just say that this is the MEC and this is the MTC. Or if you prefer it better, we could go back to this graph here again. And okay, so first we're going to skip the part where all three phases are mixed together, absorption, distribution, elimination, and start somewhere here, somewhere roughly here, and say 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say, let's pick this point because it's easier. We know where the line is, but it could be any point. Okay, so at this time, T1, we had dose D. Now, this is 4 grams, just roughly. I mean, this is 4 units of the drug. Now, half-life means that the time it takes for the drug to be 50% eliminated. So 50% of the D, this 4 units would be here, right? D over 2, right? So then this is the time where the drug is now 50% eliminated. And then if I drop this down and subtract T1 from T2, then that would be T half-life. And this should be constant, right? Regardless. If you take any other point at the different, over the curve, you should always get T half-life. Yes, ma'am. Sure.
How do you know, like, where in terms of that graph, how do you know when the elimination and the
Okay, excellent point. So normally, guys, we do not use the concentration of the drug. We use log the concentration, and the curve will look like a straight line. Okay, and the first part, you would see that the first part will look like a curve, but then once the straight line starts, then that's when you could actually calculate the T half-life at any point. That's been said, I have to make a confession that this is pharmacokinetics. You will learn about this from Dr. Takimoto in later sessions, okay? But my goal is to cover the basic concepts such that when I go back in the material and say the T half-life, elimination, duration of action, then you know what I'm talking about, okay? So I'm trying to cover, just the basic concepts and pharmacokinetics that are needed for the rest of this session. You will go back and learn all these again. But I mean, I'm not trying to discourage you from learning more. So if you have questions or if anything does not make sense, let me know. So did I answer your question, Cheryl? No, not yet. So, okay. So how do I know where to start measuring? Instead of having a dose here, normally we'd use log D. When we use log D, you will have something like that. If this is log D, then you will have something like this and straight curve. Okay, so then we'd skip anything that is not straight line, let's say from here, and then we can do the math on this line and then make sure that you're always going to get the same half-life. Okay, so when you take the log value for the drug, you will actually see the elimination going a straight line. Why? Because guess what? You will learn this in pharmacokinetic. Elimination is actually a first order process, which means that the log of this concentration is go in a steady slope, I guess constant slope with the time. Okay, so when you take the log, you will see that exactly where the straight line starts, and then you can use the curve to calculate the half-life. Okay, if you get it, great. If not, we can talk about it in my, in my office or something, or if not, you could learn about it later. Yes, Maria. Excellent. So the drug elimination process by itself is a first order process, which means the relationship between the time and the dose will look like linear only if you take the log value of that dose, okay? Okay. If you have questions, we can talk about this after the class, okay? Because like I said, this is pharmacokinetics. You will learn more from Dr. Takimoto. More details, more examples, more about the 0 order and 1 order. But for now, I just want to cover the basics, okay? But please, I do not want to discourage you from asking questions. So I will be glad to, teach you the whole pharmacokinetics if I could. But, time is limited, so. Okay, so exercise number 2. To provide an example or proof, I want you to prove for yourself that it takes 5 to 7 half-lives for the drug to be eliminated. Start with this, part first, and then also prove to yourself that it also takes the same amount, 5 to 7 half-lives, for the drug to reach to the steady state concentration. Did you guys get the chance to look at that? Okay. So let's set, 5 or 6 minutes. At 11:30, we will look together. And I want to give you a hint, okay? Use the dose interval, make the dose interval equal to the T half-life. So make a curve and then try to administer the drug every T half-life, because it's easier to do the math than when you have a different dose, using a different dose interval. So if the half-life for the drug is, say, 1 hour, then calculate the dose every 1 hour, how much. So give the same amount of the drug every 1 hour to see how the curve will reach the steady state. So this is in the case of the administering the drug. Now, of course, in the case of elimination, it's not going to matter. Just say, I'm at this stage here. This is where the drug level in the blood. And then what's going to happen after 1 half-life? What's going to happen after another half-life? And see how much of the drug is remaining, okay? Still confused faces? Okay, it will be clear once I explain it, I promise. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so, all right, so I hope you get, the idea of what I'm talking about when how the drug takes 5 to 7 half-lives to be eliminated or accumulation. So let's look at this curve, which would explain it, and I'll also show the table I was looking for. So anyway, looking at this curve, if we consider the elimination phase, if this is 100% of the drug, and each one of these is the T half-life, okay, so time is by half-life. This is 1 half-life, 2, 3, and so forth. So at 1 half-life, the drug will be reduced, in the blue line, will be reduced to 50%, right? At another half-life, 50% of that will be cut into half, so you have 20 half-life, 25%. One more half-life, you get what? 12.5. 6.25. 3.125. Can you stop here for a second? 3.125. This means that more than 95% of the drug is eliminated. So that's why for some people, if I'm happy with 95% of the drug eliminated, I would consider this, completely. I would say that the drug now is completely eliminated. Then I would go with the 5 half-lives. Okay. Some people might be more picky and say, no, I want to make sure 99% of the drug is eliminated. So we said 3.125. Now you have 1.5 something, and then 0.75 something. So it's below 1%. You get the idea now? That's why we say between 5 to 7 half-life, depending on how picky you are. Okay? So you will see textbooks saying that it takes 5 half-lives for the drug to be eliminated. Other books will say 6 half-lives. Others will say 7. So don't think that there is some contradiction. It just depends on your definition of how much of the drug you want our body to be eliminated. You get this, guys? Can you raise your hand if you get that? 100%? Excellent. Okay, now, believe it or not, the same concept applies to accumulation, okay? Why? You might think, but there is another factor, which is absorption, right? Normally, absorption is a fast process, and so absorption distribution is much faster than elimination. So in the curve, just like the curve we saw earlier of the oral absorption, the drug goes up quickly, and then we start worrying about elimination. So assuming that 100% of the drug makes it, assuming that it's an IV infusion, which means the drug is immediately in the circulation, okay, then basically we are simply dealing with the same parameter, which is elimination, except here we're increasing the dose. So at 1 half-life, the drug at this stage 50%, 75, and so forth. So it takes another 5 to 7 half-life to reach. If you do not believe me, you can do it for yourself, because I did not believe myself first. So I did this figure here, okay? Okay, so first one here shows, the first one here, forget that, just look here, shows what happens after 5 to 7 half-life, right? So 100%, 50, 25, 12.5, 6.25. It's after 5 half-lives when you start seeing things coming below 95%. Okay? Make sense? I mean, this is the easiest part. The more challenging part is this part here. And forget the nasty equations. You will see these you'll learn about these in pharmacokinetics. So initially, you give 1 unit of a dose, okay, and then after 1 half-life, this one became 0.5, right? You give 1 unit, after 1 half-life, this unit was cut into half. Notice that you're administering 1 unit every 1 half-life. So you give another unit, now you have the half plus 1 is 1.5. And then after another half-life, it's half of this amount. If you repeat the process, you will get the same exact results, which is after 5 to 7 half-life, you get to the steady state. Okay? You can do it yourself, convince yourself. Yes, Kevin.
So if it's less, if you're getting a drug less frequent in a half-life, though, it's going to take way more than 5 or 6, right?
Actually, no, that's a very good question. Guys, regardless of the amount of time and the dose, regardless of these two, to reach the steady state, it's still gonna take 5 to 7 half-lives, okay? Unless you give a loading dose, that's an exception. If you give a loading dose, then you help the drug reach the steady state much faster. But then if you give the same dose over the same frequency, then it takes the same amount of time to reach the steady state. Now, you might see nasty curves like this, you know, if you have different dose and different intervals. So, you know, this one here is higher dosages, infrequent, but then look how often it goes above the toxic and give us toxic effect, and below the therapeutic effect where there's no effect. And then the blue one shows something more reasonable, okay? But then the infusion goes like that, okay? Again, this is just a general overview, so you get an idea, a feeling of what's half-life, duration of action, all that. You will learn about all these things from Dr. Takimoto. Okay, it's like a whole course of pharmacokinetics that, you know, that I cannot cover just in one lecture, okay? You will also learn about this equation here, which shows the relationship between the frequency of the dose and the concentration, the steady state, the T half-life. So basically, if I know how much I want the drug to be in the plasma, then how much should I administer dose-wise and frequency to make sure, you know, I reach that steady state, okay? Given what's the T half-life, the bioavailability, and all that. This is just something we'll learn about later, but just keep that in mind. These factors, how they play together to affect the time it takes for drug to reach the steady state, okay? Right, I'm not gonna take questions here, but please, you're welcome to ask me in my office or by email. You know, I was glad to go through all these details because it's just, like I said, brief introduction, so we could continue with our session with. Okay, this figure here, which addresses exercise number 3, talks about the relationship between concentration of the drug. I'm sorry, the concentration of the drug in blue and its effect. Remember when we said when the drug drops below the therapeutic effect, then the effect will disappear, except when you have irreversible binding. In this case, it's reversible, but what's happening here? The drug is slowly leaving the receptor, okay? So there is some gap in, you know, the concentration and effect. Now, in the case, if the drug is irreversibly bound, guess how this curve is gonna look like? Straight line, okay? So just to give you an idea how the drug is being eliminated, at the same time, those that are bound to the receptor, reversibly, are leaving the receptor, but slowly. Now, if it's irreversibly bound with a covalent, it's just gonna stay up. So this is the key point in exercise number 3. I feel like I'm rushing you now, huh? Okay, so questions. Take just a few questions. Which one? Oh, for number 3? Okay. So remember when we said that even though the drug could be eliminated out of the body, but those that are bound forever with the receptors, they're gonna still produce effect, okay? So this could be represented with this curve here. Okay, so here in this curve, you have the concentration of the drug eliminated, and this here shows the effect. Now, in this case, the receptor is actually reversibly bound to the drug, so it's leaving the receptor, but it just takes some time before it actually leaves the receptor as the concentration is going down, okay? If it's if it was bound through covalent bond, irreversible, this red line will look like that, straight line, okay? Yes, this one here is reversible, just to show you that, you know, there is a correlation between the drug as it leaves the body, but, you know, correlation between that and the effect, but it just, you have to wait for the drug to unbound from the receptor and leaves, okay? Okay, so the volume of distribution in the case where someone has a drug that's a lipophilic or a hydrophilic, which volume is larger? Well, first of all, let me tell you that both drugs are within the acceptable log p value, okay? Because when someone asked me a really good question, he said, you know, if the drug is lipophilic, it's not going to even make it to the circulation. It's going to stay in the stomach, or right? So we're talking about drugs that both have reasonable balance of lipophilicity and hydrophilicity, so they both will be absorbed, distributed, and reach, you know, the blood circulation. Now, the ones that are more lipophilic, like I explained earlier, they will, you know, spread more because they will attach to the lipophilic tissues, and the volume will be larger. That's it for this exercise. Okay, so drugs that are more lipophilic, they will distribute further into the lipophilic tissues, the fatty tissues, and so it will have a larger volume, larger space that it will occupy out of our body than those that are hydrophilic, which will only stay in the blood, okay? Now, let me remind you that both drugs should have this balance of lipophilicity, hydrophilicity that we talked about earlier. So they should be able to cross the cell into the blood. Because if we talk about a drug that's like way lipophilic, then it's probably just going to stay in the stomach and not even reach the circulation, right? Okay? And if it's way hydrophilic, the same thing is going to be dissolved in the stomach. It's never going to cross the gut wall. So we're looking at drugs that have the balance. Now, those that are more lipophilic, they will be able to bind and spread deeper into the fat tissues and then have larger volume. Good. Looks like you have a question. Yeah. Say it again. Okay. The volume distribution. Okay. So drugs that are more lipophilic will have larger volume distribution because the drug is able to distribute outside the blood and go bind to the fat tissues. So it actually spends time in the blood, but part of this drug will actually go to the fatty tissues. So then it will have a larger volume of distribution. And we're talking about the same person, like someone with 42, you know, liter of fluids, but two different drugs, one of them will have a different volume distribution than the other. Questions? I don't like it when I see the confused faces. I will not be able to sleep at night. All right, let's take a few questions, because yes. No, so roughly a 70 kilogram human being, roughly they will have like 42 liters of water, fluids. Of course, yeah, of course. So actually, like difference in male, female, difference in, so you will see, yeah, this is just a rough example of, I just want you guys to keep in mind that it's the same person, the same amount of water in the body, 42 liters, but if you measure the volume distribution for one drug versus another drug, you will have two different values. And the reason why, because it all goes to the fact that concentration is equal to dose over volume, right? Okay. Now, which one of these three parameters are fixed? Dose, right? So dose is fixed, right? So if you give a dose of a drug to that person and wait until it distributes to the body, and then take a sample and measure the concentration, right? And use this equation, those that are lipophilic, they will be diluted into the fatty tissues, so the concentration would be less, and thus the volume would be larger, okay? Those that are hydrophilic, they will be contained into the blood. They're not gonna be, like spread to the tissues. So the concentration would be what? Higher, and the volume would be less. That's why whenever we refer to the volume of distribution, we say the apparent volume distribution, because it appears to be this is the volume, but in fact its volume is fixed. It should be the same for any drug, but I mean for a human being. But we have to use the apparent volume of distribution when we do the math, okay? You will learn about this in pharmacokinetic, don't worry about it. Again, I'm sorry you have to cover these things like superficially, or just so when later on when I say, this drug has larger volume distribution, then you know what I'm talking about, okay? Yes.
So hydrophilic, you have a higher concentration and
what do you think? Yeah, what do you think? Yes, because they are contained into the blood. They are not, being like, distracted by the fatty tissues. Then they are more concentrated, and so the volume would be smaller, okay? Somebody else wanted to ask a question over there in the back. You have a question, Kendra? Say that again, I'm sorry. Yes, larger. Okay, because they are lipophilic. Why? Because when we talk about it, designing drugs and nature of these drugs, you will see that two drugs, one of them is more lipophilic, and then I will say, it has a larger volume of distribution. So I don't have to come back and explain this, okay? Because you'll be in trouble if I do. I'm spending all this time in these basics, so we cannot go back to them again. Okay? All right. I see faces are smiling now, more like smiley, happy faces. Okay. Okay, so we have talked about bioavailability, right? But I want to provide this experiment or this example just so you actually, do the math and find out how bioavailability is calculated. Let me check the other two, see if that's. Oh, exercise number 6, and then I'll go back to 5. Oh, 6 and 7. Okay, so 7 we covered already, right? We talked about the controlled release and delayed release, except John. He's still disagreeing with me, but we'll fight about it after the class. Anyway, so number 6 talks about the frequency of these doses that we basically comparing two things, or actually how many factors: efficacy, safety, and convenience. So compare between these, the dotted line here, or dashed line, I think I should say, and this blue line. Forget about the red one, the infusion. So one of them, like we said, has larger dose, and we're giving it less frequent, okay, infrequent. Let's say, you take large amount and like every 5 or over long period of time. The other one, you give small amount of drug over small periods. So like, one step at a time, right? So we all agree that this one here is confined within the therapeutic window. So it's more, it's safer, okay? It's more safe, okay? Now, as far as efficacy, which one is more effective to see the drug, to see the therapeutic effect? Notice how this one here drops below the window, while this one here stays longer. And so basically this one is also more efficacious. So efficacy and safety. The third factor is convenience. This one here is more, more convenient because you're not taking the drug every 2 hours, for example. You take it just every 8 hours or once a day. But which is more important, convenience or safety? Safety is more important, right? Hopefully, you would design the drug in a controlled release and such that you administer it only once a day, and then the tablet would take care of reading the drug small amount at a time. Clear? Let me go back to question number 5 to finish it, and then we'll open the door for exercises. Questions. So basically, it says that a drug has 30% oral bioavailability. This means that when it's taken orally, okay, 30% is equal to how much the drug will make it. This is a drug in circulation, and this is drug given, the amount given, okay? So if I want the amount of the drug to reach the circulation to be 6 milligrams, how much should I give? Say it again. 20. So 6 divided by 20 is 30. I'm sorry? 0.3. Make sense? Everybody? Now, this is important because many times as a pharmacist, you have to switch from one route of administration to another, right? So if you want to give a drug orally, and this is how much you want to reach the circulation, you're going to give 20 milligrams. Now, in the case of IV, how much should I give? So IV has 100%, which means the 6 milligrams will reach fully to the circulation. So I should give 6 milligrams in the case of the IV. Make sense? Again, this is not a question I would ask in the exam. I'm mid-chem. I will be asking chemistry questions. But I want you to know what's bioavailability. And I did the math here, so you have a feeling of why bioavailability is important. Because later on, we will say that we designed this drug. It has a high oral bioavailability. Okay, so why is this important? It's because of this. When you have higher bioavailability, then you don't have to give more of the drug to reach the circulation. Yes, question. Actually, no, the only part that you might want to do calculation, but you don't even need a calculator, is when you do the empirical method to measure the water soluble or not, the potentiating the water, what do we call them? The potentially soluble groups. And the other part, which talks about ionization and unionization, you don't have to do the math. If you just know the table, that's it, enough for me. In later sessions, you will have to do the math to find what's the percentage of the drug is ionized using the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, okay? But I mean, for my part, I just want you to know which is more dominant. Questions about Anything we had today so far? I'm planning to make a review session on Friday between 12 and 1 next Friday. How does that work? Okay. So just, I mean, for my part, I'll try to ask Dr. Pearson if he, if that's a good time for him to be here or not, and then I will consult with you. Okay. So next Friday we'll have a review session, but I still have 5 minutes. So questions? Yes, ma'am. Actually, okay. So guys, remember the material for the CAT one will go all the way up until next Wednesday, right? So next Wednesday, I posted the material for the autonomic nervous system. So that will be part of the exam. So everything we have studied so far plus the class on Wednesday. And the class on Friday will not be part of the first midterm. It will be the next midterm, okay? But then, once we finish the class after 12, we'll sit here for 1 hour and see if you better be prepared with questions, okay? If there's no questions, I will start going through these exercises, applications, but it's better that you guys be prepared. So you have some, like 3 days off. Do not waste them, okay? I mean, have fun, but study too. I still want to see if you have any questions before you leave. We have 3 minutes because, I want to make sure these all concepts are covered. Yes, Vivian. Yes. Yes. So I know I posted like 30 pages, but if you only look at the reading objectives, that's the only thing you need to worry about for the IRAT, okay? So only go through the reading objectives, like 15 reading objectives. But, so yeah. Questions? Questions, except you, John. You have a question? After the class? Now? I mean, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the lipophilic will have larger volume and less concentration. Questions? So was everything clear today? Yes? Okay. It better stay clear when you get to the exam. Okay? All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful weekend and wonderful 3 days off. Have fun. Do not forget to give me back the sign sheet. And if you have any comments or, difficult concepts, thank you.